So, looking over the last data or DCA that your kids took, who would you say the sub-pops groups are that you're needing to focus on from now until start?
Michelle, do you want to go first or you want me to go first?
You could go.
Okie dokie. So I've kind of looked at some of the data from all of my last DCAs, especially since we're preparing for STAR. It's important to kind of see all the different areas. So some of the kiddos that I chose, for me personally, are just kind of like those bubble kids that just need a little bit extra in them right now. And so I picked 3 from each of our classes. Do you want those names of the kids? Okay, so I picked Ariana and Aislinn and Jaslyn in my first class. And they're all 3 little, like, all 3 of those girls, they just need a little bit of extra, I think, just support and maybe even just confidence too. And so, the other ones are, in the other classes, Penelope, Zoe, and Patience. I think all mine's ended up being girls. And then, the other class is Sierra, Charlotte, and Connor. And so what I'm doing with them until STAR is I've decided to use my path just once a week, and I am having the whole 3rd grades doing it, but I'm really targeting these kids and watching these kids. So I just picked a path that I'm currently, like, the teaks that I'm working on in class, and I did a my path assignment on there. And so all the kids do it, but I'm just watching those other kids. And if these kids don't make a 60 or above, then I'm pulling them in small group, going over that skill, making sure that they really understand it, doing a little reteach, and then I have them redo the my path. And so it's just kind of a little bit extra, just something different that I haven't done in the past. I usually use Zern, and so I wanted to just try to do this and see if it'll help. And I have already seen some growth. So some of the kids, like this one specifically, she started with a 60, we did a reteach, she made 100.
So does my path give you the resources you need to help support them for what it's asking?
Yes, Michelle taught me that. I didn't know. So I've always used Zern, and so my path has been new for me. I've usually just had the kids just work in their path, and so now I'm working on, like, designing a plan for them. So they have materials in there that you can print off, and it has, like, a teacher edition and student edition, and so you kind of have an idea of what you need to cover, what you need to review, and then they have practice questions and independent questions that they can work through as well. So I found it pretty beneficial. I know that you've used it as well in small group, and so we've seen some pretty good data from that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so, like Creighton said, she's just started doing this. I've done the reading my path with my 7th graders when I taught them, and that's the year we had the biggest growth. So my path was, I think, a very key part of that. And that is when my path went to where we could make their paths, and so we got to choose, individual pathways for each kid. And so I still do that. I do that with my 3rd graders. This last 2 weeks, I built a path for my kiddos for claim, which is pretty hard. It's a tough one for them. And then we're working on text structure, and so last week we did sequencing. And so doing it through my path and being able to see that, we track our data, and I can see, I automatically noticed, oh my goodness, sequencing, they're nailing it, it's great. I only had a few that didn't do well, and so the ones that don't do well, we bring to a mini teach. And I have Lacey do that sometimes. She's our MTSS teacher, and so sometimes she'll do the little mini reteach for me, and then we'll put them back on my path and let them do it again and see if they can show growth. Occasionally I have Shiloh Charter do it. She's my inclusion aide, and so if it's an inclusion kiddo, I will let her pull and do a small group with them to help them out with that. And we've had some really great growth. Like I said, that claim was really difficult, but I have about 3 kids per classroom also. We kind of just try to spread it out, and it just seemed to work that way.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little bit heavier in one class than the other, depending on what we're doing.
This one just worked out.
Yeah, it was just kind of, this time was just how it worked out. But I've had some students that made a 20 on claim, and then after the mini reteach and the retake, they made a 100. I had several of those, and so they show a lot of growth that way. My path has little lessons that you can print, or you can do your own, of course, but it's got a lot of resources for us to use. we are starting to see, though, there are a few things in
Yeah.
my path that they don't have. A few teaks that they don't cover.
Yeah.
With RLA, a lot of it's the writing. It's mostly just
Yeah.
reading, which is okay. I mean,
Right.
we just go another path with that.
Yeah.
And like Creighton said, she did Zern.
Yeah.
And so
If they
if
don't
my
have
path
it.
doesn't have it, then I'll use another resource to do it with. And again, it's still just kind of, how do they pull them into small groups. Small groups really seem to help. Another pop that I have been watching and really pushing, in guided reading, we switched our guided reading kiddos around. I used to have the lower ones, but now I have the high ones, and the high ones are really, really hard to get to move because they're so high. And so we switched them around. I wanted to give it a try, and I had 3 out of 6 in one of my groups that moved up another level. They're on level U. And so they did move up finally. Their biggest problem, I think my higher kids, is that comprehension. They can read anything.
Word
like
call,
you can put it
all of
out there, they're good to go, but you ask them what they read and they don't know. And so it was a really big struggle for a little while. It took, I think, probably about 4 weeks before I could start seeing some growth with them because they just were not comprehending. And so in our guided reading, we have been targeting certain skills and mostly comprehension skills. And so 1 week we will work on main idea, and so we teach them to hashtag for main idea, and then they're able to, and then we turn it into that retell or paraphrase the story, so it goes into another teak. And so we just work with them every week using the guided reading. We still do all the guided reading things, but in 3rd grade it moves from just reading words to comprehension, and so we really push that, and that has helped a ton this year. As the RLA teacher, that guided reading really supports what I do, and it's just worked out really well. Adding that is just a little bitty component that we put in there every week. And all 3 of us do that, so all 3 of us end up being RLA teachers for an hour every day.
Well, and especially like if they can't read, if they can't comprehend, how can they do math? And that's one of the most tested area. When I was looking at the distribution document, the biggest one is like addition and subtraction, whole numbers. Well, that's not just adding and subtracting numbers. That's in a word problem. And so Michelle
They
and I
have to
said
know what to do.
they have to
even
know.
solve.
Yeah, and so that's something that like some of those high kiddos that we've been really pushing on comprehension, I have seen some benefits from us doing that, asking it in different ways and showing them different questions and how it is going to be assessed. Just because.
And it's shown on their DCAs. You can see, my high kids, they're really hard. If you're making a 95, you've got to make that 95 or higher every single time. You don't get to go down or you don't show growth. And so it's a lot of pressure for them. But they are stepping up to it and they're hanging in and they're doing really well. Another thing that Creighton and I are doing is tutoring to get ready for STAR. I do wish we would have started it about 2 weeks earlier. Next year we will.
We will next year.
But we are taking some of our targeted kids, but also we offered it to anybody and everybody. And I think we ended up with 25 kids who signed up to do it after school, which was way more than we thought we were going to get. So we were like, okay, that's great. This whole room is full. But it works really well. And again, we do just a little mini reteach. And what we did was we went through and looked at that
that frequency distribution document
and looked at the top
Just
things
looked
that
at
are
the-
tested, and that's what we're going to work on with our kiddos in tutoring, just to give them that little extra boost right before STAR. And we're turning into a competition, and they love it.
We want to make it
They're
really
so
fun.
excited. But again, it comes down to that reading the passages, working the problems, hands-on, mini groups, small groups, things like that, and reteaching the little bitty areas that they're missing. That reteach is really huge. And then letting them try it again. Okay, now that I've taught you this, now that we've looked at what you struggle with, see what this is, now you know how, go do it, and sending them back out to do it again to see if they're successful.
That's awesome.
And we made these groups, what we did when we sat down, the best way to group your kiddos is sometimes to have like a high, a medium high, and a medium low. So all of our kids, we didn't have like a whole bunch of like low kiddos. I hate saying that, you
No,
know.
that's
So we
But
don't
so
have
problem,
them.
yeah.
we didn't, and so the way
Mhm.
I kind of worked it out is we just like set them out and we laid them in. We just kind of said, okay, this high kiddo would be really good with these two medium kiddos because they do good at like explaining it to them. You never want. Sometimes those higher kiddos have a
Do
hard
the
time
work.
explaining.
They don't know how to put it
Right.
into words. They just know how to solve
Yeah.
it.
So
Right.
we really tried to be intentional with our grouping as well, and so the kids when they're working on that guided, or I guess as we're kind of introducing it, we have a little bit of guided practice time. We
Right.
wanted them to be able to use their group to kind of push them further as well. So it's not just like all on them.
Right.
And then that just makes it a little bit more fun getting to work with somebody else
Right.
too.
For
So
sure.
And we like to do the peer teaching.
Yeah.
You
It
know,
happens a
teacher
lot.
teaching is great, occasionally, but peer teaching is a lot better for them, they listen better. We said, like Creighton said, they're kind of set up in quintile groups, and so we take our 4 quintiles. Like she said, we didn't have very many lows, and so it ended up kind of being 3 quintiles, which is okay,
Right.
it's fine. But I think Creighton and I have both set up our classrooms, and Lacey
yeah.
has set up her classroom in quintile groups. And we know that you've got a low, you've got 2 mediums, and you've got a high, and your 2 mediums are the most important ones,
Right.
because they're the ones that can explain how to do it when your high doesn't. Your high knows the answer, that's great, you gotta know the answer.
But how to
Can you
get there.
But how did you get there? So they explain, and then the low benefits from the kid that knows the answer and the kids that can explain it to them. And so we set it up, you know, our classrooms are like that, our tutoring's like that. We set just, and all of us are on the same page doing that. And so that makes a huge, huge difference. And it takes a lot of the load off the teacher when you do that.
Right. Well, sometimes a kid can hear you say something, and then they hear their friend or somebody say the same thing, and
In
then now they
kid-friendly
get
language.
it.
Yeah, that's
Right.
it.
That makes sense.
So that's kind of our plan, like with our targeting growth. We're just gonna continue to do that from, I mean, I think that if it wasn't working, we would obviously change it, but
Right.
it seems like everything is
Yeah.
working and we're so far into the year that I think we're just gonna keep rocking with that plan.
Yeah, and we've really shown growth. All
Yeah.
of us have all of our kids have shown growth in all the subjects, and in their guided reading. So that's huge. Even, you know, we've got, of course, those bubble kids that you gotta push a little bit. Our low kids, they have shown some growth, even a couple of them that Lacey works with. They weren't moving all year. We worked and worked and worked, and finally she had one of them that moved up
Two levels?
2 levels, and then another one that moved up 1, and so we've got that growth, it's coming, it was long due, but.
That's how it was with this group in second grade last year. Second grade started with this group of students on like 28%
Right.
on reading level, which is a J.
Right.
And by May, we had over 80% on
Yeah.
for third grade. So
Yeah.
this group might just take a little minute to
Yeah.
turn it on after
Yeah.
Christmas,
Yeah,
spring
they
break
seem
roll.
to have just.
Well, for so long, our reading level, we set it an in for a pretty
while.
long time, and so we're all like, come on,
Yeah.
get to that in, get to that in. Well, now we're at that O,
Yeah.
and so now we're seeing some of those kids. We're like, okay, it's time to move. But like when that comprehension's out there, you know, you don't want to move them. It's got to be that both.
Yeah.
Because it's just an injustice to do that at that point. So
And second grade's on board with that too, cause there's 7 or 8 that are already on a Q,
wow,
but is the comprehension
is the
there?
comprehension in there?
I've only seen 6 of them,
Yeah.
and
I've kept like 6 kids on a queue
Yeah.
all year
Yeah.
because I will not move them
Mhm.
until
a
that
second
comprehension's
grade
there.
Q is
It's
different from a
different.
third grade
Absolutely.
Q and a fourth grade Q.
See, and that's what I'd like to do. I almost think I should go get a second grade Q and see if the comprehension's there. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because it might be.
And the vocabulary, it's the text,
I'm just curious.
the maturity of what it is
Yeah.
they're reading
What
is
they're reading.
different.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so tell me about your plans from now until STAR, whole group. I see that you guys have a competition going out there.
Yes.
What is y'all's plans to review until STAR?
Michelle, you go first since you're rocking reviews first.
Yeah, in fact, today we're working on finishing out planning our rocking review. In my rocking review, I have 10 days. We pick a genre for every day, and then we take 2 days for ECR, and we usually take 1 or 2 days for SCR. And so that we get everything in there. We do a genre a day. It's just a hit it fast. I do 2 teaks per day, there are more teaks that we do, but we concentrate on those two, and then there's always that one teak that goes, the supporting teak that goes with it.
They're applying it
Yes,
without focusing on it.
Right, exactly. They just do it because that's what you're supposed to do, and then they're used to doing that.
Right.
But we do 2 teaks a day. I try to keep it hands-on. A lot of annotating because they're gonna need to do that on STAR. Nowadays, we've kind of taken away paper stuff. There's nothing on paper.
Right.
It's all in the Chromebook because having the kids learn to read off of a computer is different than having them read off of paper. And that, I think, is one of our biggest struggles in 3rd grade. Or now, of course, 2nd graders are doing it now. You guys are reading off the computer instead of off of paper because they know that test is gonna be on the computer. And there's a lot of things that they can do on paper that they can't do. And so we're adjusting. One of the other things that we're doing that I'm really excited about is Miss Stevenson is coming in and she's doing what we call a boot camp for some of our targeted kids, so the ones that we talked about earlier. And she is teaching them testing strategies, like how do you tackle this passage? How do you tackle this question? And so she gets to do some of the things that I do throughout the year, but it's kind of a fast-paced thing, and if they don't get it, they kind of struggle with it, and so we're gonna hit them with that. How do you take a test? How do you answer this question right before they take STAR? And I think it's gonna take a lot of pressure off of them. They're gonna be like, I'm not scared of this anymore.
Right.
I know what I have to do. It's not a big deal. I've learned everything I need to learn, and so that's really gonna help them. So I'm really excited about her doing that. And then Lacey's gonna be supporting by doing centers that help support some of the things that they're gonna need on STAR. And so that helps a ton. And so it's kind of like, it's a village doing it, I'm telling you. Even Creighton, even though Creighton's the math teacher, she's supporting us. We're changing the way we're doing our guided reading for a couple of weeks and narrowing it down to those, 6 major tested things on STAR. And a couple of things that they didn't do well maybe on their DCA. We're about to take a very last DCA. We'll pull that data from there, and that's probably what we'll work on during guided reading. And so it's not, even though we're departmentalized, we all work in the same goal.
You have to be able to do that foundation.
And then I have to switch when it's her turn, and
You'll be
I'll
doing
be
that.
bouncing on my toes, but it'll be okay.
She'll be just
but
fine.
then we'll be, and we will switch because that's what we do. We support each other, and so Lacey will be doing math centers, and Miss Foster will be doing calculator stuff. But
The
I
kids
think
can
it's really
teach
helpful.
you.
They're very
Make
good at it.
on
They
them,
love it.
have them
They
get up
love to
and-
teach me things.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're doing to get ready for STAR. So
Sounds great.
on my part, so Creighton's got, after I get my
Yes.
2 weeks done and get my STAR done, then she hits it.
And
gets
so
going.
while she's doing that, I'm gonna kind of just take a little bit of a step back and let the kids have a little, not break in my room, but they need a little bit of breather. So we're gonna be working on like online tools, new item types, and we're just gonna be spiraling information in my room for a little bit. And then once I hit broken review time, once we've tested for reading, since we've got 2 weeks almost in between reading and math. What I did is I kind of just went through this frequency distribution document, looked at what teaks are tested the most. And so from there, I just took those concepts and I just split them into days. And so I'm just gonna spend a day on place value, a day on data, a day on fractions, day on geometry. I'm gonna do area and perimeter together because that is the biggest struggle, is like the kids having to determine, is it area or is it a perimeter? I mean, when it's in isolation, they can do it, but when it's together, they cannot. So we're gonna really test them, and then I'm gonna do 2 days for addition and subtraction and 2 days for multiplication and division, just because that is where they struggle the most, because it's the reading. They have to understand, and that may end up being just all operation, to be honest, at that point. And so that is kind of my plan, just based on what we've done here. And then like she said, Miss Stevenson's gonna be coming in, and we're gonna really be working problem solving. Like I said, that's where we struggle. And then she may do like a little bit of a toolkit. Like one of the things that the kids can do is draw like your multiplication chart, and so she's gonna teach them how to do their multiplication chart.
To have a resource.
Yeah, and so the first thing they do, they open up that scratch piece of paper, they draw that multiplication chart, and I mean, then that opens up the door of like, hey, it's gonna go off. That opens up that toolkit of like, oh, I need to multiply. Oh, I need to divide. Remember, I have this thing, I can use it. And so that's something that those bubble kids, target kids will be getting as well.
Have you ever taught your kids how to use an index card to make a fraction strip?
No, not on an index card. They just know how to draw them like on scratch piece of paper, but that's a great idea.
The third, at Eastridge, the third graders I had, the one time I taught math, was they used the index card, so they had those lines to help them, or maybe it was the blank side, but still.
The hole is that top part, and then it was
They
broken
folded
into.
it in half, the index card, and then they were able to,
Draw the fraction tiles.
yeah, and,
That'd be a great tool. I'm gonna write that down. Where's my
and
pencil?
so then every day, like kind of as a do now when they came in, before anything, like
Yeah.
work, when we got closer to STAR, we had them just make one every day, just to get in that
To
habit.
kind of get in that habit. Well,
Mhm.
and that's one thing that, like, especially with like comparing like denominators and like numerators, that's something that I want them to use versus like most of the time kids just check it with butterfly method, but I'm like, use that tool 1st.
Mhm.
You know, just compare the visual.
Right, and we
Rather-
had them label it, like,
yeah.
by the time they got
One
to the.
third, one third,
And we
one
had
third.
them do, we had them do where they'd do the whole, then they'd have the half, and then the fourth, and then the eighth. They might not have done,
All
it
of
could have
them.
been separate, but
Yeah.
just because those all make halves.
Those are all the
and-
even numbers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we just
And then
taught
you
them
went
like,
back in and
half it, there's your halves.
Huh.
Half the fourths, now half the fourths again. Half the
Hey.
eighths, half the fourths again, then half the fourths.
I'll
So
have
then
to play
those
with
were
it
all
for sure.
even, and then the 1/3.
Yeah, 'cause that's
and
something we can
1/6
provide.
had 'em do.
you know, an index card for sure.
And then it's a bit like they created themselves, then that's a reference.
And
for them.
everybody has that. Yep. Well, that's awesome. I mean, if every kid could have a multiplication chart that they drew and every card had that
We
fraction
can
tiles.
practice making them in my room
That's
too.
right.
like
Yeah.
As a
fraction.
center,
That would be
Yeah.
a great
When you
center.
do, when you do your
Yeah.
fraction center, yeah.
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah,
cool.
great center.
Thanks
Yeah.
for the advice on that. I
You
like
said
that.
multiplication chart, and so it made me think of the index card.
Well, and a lot of kids don't even know how to use a multiplication chart, so
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
that maybe,
Yeah.
because they just don't see them a lot.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't rely on that as much as I do the strategies, just
Mhm.
because you
Yeah,
gotta know how to. You gotta know how to multiply.
Right.
exactly.
So,
Use the tool.
well, I like that though. I wrote it down. I'm gonna put it in my toolbox.
Mhm.
But that's our plan. I think that I think we've got a pretty good plan.
I think so. I
Yeah.
really
We've
feel like
really-
I don't feel like we ran out of time this year for our star, you know?
Right.
Sometimes, some years you feel like, oh my gosh, I ran out of time, I haven't taught them everything I need to teach them.
Mhm.
This year I feel like we've taught really well in that we've got plenty of review time.
Yeah.
I don't feel as crunched as I did,
In years past.
in years past.
Yeah. I
So,
agree.
I feel like our kids are ready and we're ready. and-
Yeah, I think so. I feel pretty confident this year, especially with all the different things that we've whipped out of our back pocket this year.
Right.
When it didn't work, we changed it,
yeah.
and if that didn't
Mhm.
work, then we changed it again,
Mhm.
because you gotta find something that does work, and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Mhm, that makes sense.
we're excited to see what's
So,
to come.
yeah. So PTA will be providing the goldfish and the pretzels
Oh,
and
yeah.
water for the kids,
Right.
and then as snacks, and then thinking about your star groups and who's going to be testing. What did
Yeah.
you guys consider for placements?
So, what we did the last two DCAs, and I hope y'all don't mind me, the last two DCAs, we wrote down the time that the kids finished,
Mhm.
and then we kind of compared them based on like reading and math, and we just kind of, I looked at my last two math tests, and then Michelle looked at her last two reading tests, and we just made groups based on high,
Mhm.
medium, not high, sorry, slow, medium, fast.
Mhm.
And so from there, we just kind of put the kids where they would fit into that column. And then I'm actually going to take the slow for reading, and Michelle's going to take the medium
Mhm.
for reading, and then Lacey will take the fast.
Right.
And then the only thing that changed for math is that I'm going to take the medium, and she's going to take the slow,
Yeah,
and then
that's
she'll
okay.
still take the fast.
Mhm.
So that's still like, we're going to do that for our
Mhm.
next DCA also, so that the
Mhm.
kids
That's a
get
good
used
idea.
to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So for on Tuesday and Wednesday, we're gonna go ahead and have them test in that room and say, hey, this is where you're gonna be testing for STAR. It's nothing new.
Right.
You've already done it once during a DCA.
Mhm.
You're with us all the time, and it's not like, you know, when you're
Right.
self-contained, it's different because you have to go to a
Yeah.
different classroom. You
Yeah.
don't know this teacher.
Yeah.
These kids, they're
They
with
know
us all
all
the
of
time.
us.
They're with all three of us, so it's
Mhm.
nothing new. And so when we do this, it'll just be like, oh, okay, I get a
Yeah.
new set of kids though. I don't have to be with the same kids all the time.
Right.
So
That's true.
I think they'll be excited.
And then we also have our small groups that we went
Yeah.
through, of course, depending on their,
Accommodations.
accommodations and things, we place them in smaller groups or in different rooms. We've got a couple individual testers.
Mm-hmm.
We did also take into account a couple of our kiddos that prefer testing with
With
certain people
Right.
that they're the most comfortable with, and
Mhm.
if we could, we tried to make that happen,
Mhm.
just to make the kids more comfortable and more successful on their
Mhm.
tests. We need them to be comfortable and be, not worried about other things, be able to concentrate on what they're doing. And I think, we worked on this probably for at least 6 weeks, maybe longer,
Yeah.
moving them, putting them, rearranging them,
Mhm.
talking it through,
Yeah.
moving them again.
Yeah.
In fact, we've
We
had
just
it
did
done
it
for
there,
like
yeah.
6 weeks, and then, for our PLC on Tuesday, we were like, whoop, we need to move this kid and this kid because of certain things that are going on, and so
Mhm.
I think we've got them, where they're gonna be the most successful, and that's exciting too, that we have the
Right.
opportunity to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Well, and practice having them be in that room
Yes.
in a different setting, and it's not
Takes-
the real deal.
Right.
But it takes away that.
Get
Takes away
that
that
newness
pressure.
out of there, and
Yeah. That's exactly why we
worries.
thought we would do it.
and then lay the expectation of
Yeah.
the ones who finish fast.
Yep.
What's your
Mhm.
expectation when you're done? You don't
Right.
get to have fun.
No,
No,
you don't
you
just
get
get
to
to
sit
color,
it
you get
out.
to sit there, read a
Yeah.
book, and
Mhm.
put your head
So
down.
maybe it'll even
Right.
slow some of them down.
Well, I heard
Yeah.
there's a few Texas schools that won't let their kids do anything, not even reading. They literally have to just sit there.
Really?
And so they
Oh.
don't let their kids turn in their test until
Everybody's.
it's time.
Oh.
Because they are like, you need
So
to go
then
back.
it
and you
prompts
need
them to
look.
go back
They
if
have
they're
to go
bored. Let
back.
me just go back
Mhm.
and see.
Yeah.
But
and
then
they
that scares
still
me
have
I
because
know.
like I'm a
Change it.
second guesser.
Right.
I
Yeah.
will go back and second guess everything, so I feel like for
Right.
kids
Well,
that,
one
that
of the
can scare
ladies
me.
said that she's a lot of, kids that will like skip, questions and not realize they skipped them, and they won't go back and they won't look. But if they have to sit there and they don't want anything else to do, they go back and notice, oh my goodness,
I guess that
So,
would be true.
But I don't know, I agree with you guys,
Yeah.
I'm not real sure, I think reading a book is just fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Take a nap,
I would be the one to put my
I
head
really
down for
think-
sure.
and we set the expectation all year.
Yeah.
For, our, taking our tests with our DCAs,
Mhm.
and so they know, there's no point
Right.
rushing, because you're gonna have nothing to do when you're done. And so take your time, and they know that we'll give them the time that they need, and
Yeah.
so,
Mhm.
we make sure that they know that right from the beginning, and we do it all year, so that makes a huge difference.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
I thought that was interesting, I was like, oh, well,
It sounds like you guys have a great plan, and so I know the kids. So for the game that you guys are doing, is there something that they're having to?
Yeah, so, and
We're like,
and
oh, yeah.
I kind of do this as well through my rockin' review, but this is just for our tutoring kids right now.
Okay.
So what we did is we're gonna do like a prize each week, and so this last week was short, so we didn't count it.
Right.
So it'll be like this last week plus the other two.
Yeah.
But what we're gonna do is the top team is gonna get to eat with one of us. So if it was like an hourly week, they would eat with her,
Yeah.
or maybe both of us. Who knows?
Yeah.
And they love the lunch
Oh,
buffets.
they do,
Yeah.
they do.
And we just figured we'd put on a little show of some sort, like what is
We're
that,
gonna
wild
make
crowds or
Lacey
something.
do, cartwheels is what we're gonna
Yeah, we're gonna
do.
make Lacey do cartwheels.
Yeah.
And then if they got second place, we're gonna have them, they get to choose a prize for my prize box.
Mhm.
And then the third place, we said bring a stuffy. They love bringing
They
stuffed
love it
animals.
this year.
Like, the
love it.
kids love it. And so
I
we're like,
love
let's
the
just-
innocence. They
Yes,
can just
it's
stay
the
on
best.
innocent.
Yeah,
It's
so
the
we're gonna let
best.
them do that. And so what we did is like, whatever, let's say the student makes a 60, then that's 60 points towards their team.
Okay.
And so then like, let's say they make 60, 140. I would add those up to
Okay.
200 points, and then we would just account the 200, and then maybe they do 140 for this one.
Mhm.
Anyways, the highest number
Yeah.
would be the winner.
And so it's
And then it
based on their grade, and so that really
Motivates
Motivates
them to.
them.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
And even if you make a 20, or even
It's
if you
still
make a
20
60,
points.
it's still
Right.
20 points.
And so you don't
So-
feel as.
Nope.
You're still participating, you're
Mhm,
still
mhm.
giving towards your team. Now,
Right.
obviously, if we're in tutoring and we're making a 20, we need to have a conversation.
Right,
Right.
Yeah, whatever's we're
Yeah.
doing is not
It's
working.
not working.
But like 60, we said like 60 is that it hits that approaches,
Yeah,
and
it
so
Mhm.
we're not gonna like fuss over that.
No,
by any
60
means.
is passing for what we're doing.
For what we're and math path is hard.
It is.
It makes
It
things
is.
almost, I don't want to say, it's just the rigor is high.
It
and
is
so
very high.
I had some of the second graders stop doing it because they were done with their path and it pushed them to third grade. And I was like, because I've taught third grade, realized this is third grade content. I was like, let's stay in our lane here.
Yep.
You don't have to do it anymore.
They're just not really ready for it.
Right.
In second grade, you know.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's a lot.
They'll get that when they get here.
They sure will.
So.
They definitely will. But yeah, that's how we set up our point system, and we broke them into teams and came up with fun superhero names, and they love that.
We had somebody tell me earlier, one of the teachers said, "I've got my money on Iron Brains."
I
said,
know,
"Okay."
Iron Brains. They were so
I said,
excited.
"Okay."
So we gave them.
Teachers
I gave them.
Well, we got teachers betting on our kids right now.
It's gonna win, so
It's gonna
hey,
win.
we're all in.
Yep.
So, but
Well,
yeah, that's their little prizes. They get snacks. We had a
Oh, yeah.
parent that was very, very kind and donated snacks for our tutoring, and so I gave them superpower pencils.
Oh yeah.
And so we've kind of just got that
Hyped it up.
Yeah, we
we're
just
just like,
Some of the kids were like, "Man, I want to do tutoring." I'm like,
You're like,
"Sorry, you didn't
time's
sign up."
yeah, and so they're like, oh man, but the kids are in there just loving it, and
That's great.
you know,
Yeah.
we try to hype it up as much as we can, give them that final little push, and
Yeah.
I'm excited to see.
Me too. I'm excited to see the growth. Yeah, for sure.
Well, thanks for sharing that with me.
You're welcome.
And that's all.
All right.
The video, it thought I left the